Not easy being the fastest quarterback you've never seen. I'll be right back. There's no quicker way to get into DFS. Play Super Draft today and see for yourself.
We're behind. They're all fired up. What we got to do? First place, our defense has got to go out there and take the ball. Then when we get the ball, we got to have 11 people that's going to do their job and try to score every time you get the football. If we do that, we'll be all right. That will be all right.
Happy Monday, everybody. This is another episode, another edition of Football University with me, Matt Caddell, as you can see it in the background. This is the football show for all the football enthusiasts, the football heads, where we talk anything and everything football. And yes, we find a way to bring it back to Alabama. So RTR, Roll Tide to all the Bama fans, the football fans. Please hit that like and subscribe notification. We're here on the CTS Sports Room. So we're so glad to have you. Let's get it started here. We're going to talk about a lot of topics from NFL draft, Bama players, Bryce Young, the Alabama football offseason, getting excited for spring training, the guys working in offseason and how tough the offseason is, and other topics. We're going to get into USFL and the XFL. So I told you, this is what we do at Football University. We find a way to talk football. So let's get it started. And shouts out to the student section before we get to our first topic. Rise up, Spencer, RTR, Roll Tide, Rise up, Nick Saban Jr., RTR. So let's get it started with our first topic. And as I mentioned earlier, I want to talk about the NFL draft. And I'm so excited about this draft because Alabama could potentially not only have the number one pick and have two top three picks, the number one and number two pick, but I think it'll be two picks in the top five. But to me, this draft is all about Bryce Young. To me, it is the Bryce Young Invitational, as you would like to say. To me, Bryce Young is the pendulum, or he's the focal point of this draft. He's the person, and it's been a lot of rumors coming out. This NFL draft, teams are going to be Bryce Young happy. You have the whole Bryce Young, CJ Stroud comments. People are going to talk about, oh, is Bryce Young too small, his weight, his height? But for me, I just cut on the tape and I see Bryce Young, and he is elite. I'm saying he is a magician when it comes to playing quarterback. To me, he's the number one pick. But I want to talk about Bryce Young and this NFL draft. Things owners are starting to talk about, certain teams positioning themselves. They're starting to play chess. And this is what we do here at Football University. We discuss anything and everything. When it comes to the NFL, the business side, the coaching side, we're going to get into it. But what about a lot of drama from last week? You saw the coaching hires. We were getting off in this a little bit later. But Shane Steichen, the Eagles offensive coordinator, becomes the Indianapolis Colts head coach. And Jim Irsay, they have an introduction and press conference, and Jim Irsay's talking about the draft, and he's with the GM, and they're talking about Shane Steichen had a great point talking about, which I love. This shows he's an offensive mind. She said, we're going to throw the ball to score points, but we're going to run the ball to win games. And to bring it back to Alabama, I think that's what Alabama has to get back to being dominant, being able to run the ball to win games and utilize these weapons to put points up on teams. But we know blocking and tackling, football, offensive line, physical, you have to be physical. So to bring it back to Alabama, if Alabama gets back to running the ball to win games, we'll get back to being dominant. But I love that point by Shane Steichen. So he's the offensive guy. Jim Irsay is right there. Ballard, the GM, is there. And they're talking about the draft. And, Jim Irsay, he's kind of a wild, kind of charismatic type of guy. So he will say whatever. And he kind of alluded to the fact that, hey, we may trade up or trade back. And we know that the Chicago Bears hold that number 1 pick. And we're going to get off into, you take Bryce or Justin Fields. But anyway, we're focusing on the Indianapolis Colts. And Jim Irsay has a great line, just kind of get the Bryce Young sweepstakes started. We know the Indianapolis Colts have the number 4 pick, but the Chicago Bears have the number 1 pick. And the Houston Texans, the division rivals, have the number 2 pick with D'Amico Ryans. Shouts out to D'Amico Ryans, the new head coach, former Bama players. Congrats, D'Amico. But speaking of D'Amico, but the Indianapolis Colts, I'm going to stay on the Indianapolis Colts. Jim Irsay, the excitement, he's looking at film. He's probably been studying Bryce for the past 2 years. And he mentioned that, hey, the Alabama kid does not look half bad either. So he's just throwing it out there. I think it went viral. Everybody was saying, hey, the Colts could be showing their hand and saying, hey, we're coming and trade up for Bryce Young. Which I think will be interesting. So kind of getting the thing started, hearing things from Texans, D'Amico Ryans, some of their front office guys. We know the Texans with the number 2 pick want Bryce Young, but I think they're going to have to fight off the Indianapolis Colts. I can literally see the Indianapolis Colts trading up, falling in love with Bryce Young, trading up for that first pick, maybe putting the package together with the Chicago Bears, and, maybe giving them a Michael Pittman. I don't know if you trade a Michael Pittman, but giving them some assets, maybe a second and a third, or maybe a late first, or, a defensive lineman, something to come up to that first round. But the Indianapolis Colts, hey, right now, I think I wouldn't be surprised if Bryce Young goes to the Indianapolis Colts. Let me know what your thoughts are. But I had to say that from the Colts perspective. And talking about teams that are interested in Bryce Young, I mentioned in past episodes, you talking about the Indianapolis Colts. We know D'Amico Ryans. How awesome would that be? The Texans with the number 2 pick are able to draft Bryce Young. You have D'Amico, Bryce in the same draft, on the same team, in the same organization. Nothing but Alabama guys. The Alabama guys, the head coach and the franchise quarterback is Bryce Young, an Alabama former player, one of the greats. So how cool was that? But I think it's some other teams. But I do think, how cool is this? AFC South rivals, the Texans and the Colts, so much is riding on this draft pick when I think is going to be who's going to go for Bryce. Right now, I wouldn't be surprised if the Colts trade up with the Chicago Bears for that number 1 pick. But right now, I'm going to say the Colts. But here at Football University, we talk about it all. But before I get to my next Bryce topic, let's get to the student section. Before I get to my next topic, RTR, Stephen, before I'm going to come back to you, Stephen Hick. Matt, does it not hurt these first rounders going to the worst teams in the NFL? I don't think it hurts as much, but I think, it has to be a great fit for the team. The NFL is such a business, and not all organizations are the same. Not all teams have the great front office, the great GMs. They know how to put together a roster. Not all teams have the schematic offensively scheme. But I put this in my notes. To answer your point, I think this benefits, I believe this benefits Bryce Young, because, and I give this comparison for Bryce Young. The Indianapolis Colts have already done this before with Andrew Luck. I mean, they had mad success with taking, after Peyton Manning, retired. No, he didn't retire. He went on to Denver. He did so much for the organization, bringing a Super Bowl. But they knew they were going to take the number one pick with Andrew Luck, and they had a young offensive mind. You have that with Shane Steichen. So I want to draw the parallels with Andrew Luck and Bryce Young. You have a young offensive mind and head coach, Shane Steichen. You have you could trade up for the number one pick and get Bryce Young. So they've kind of already done it, and I think it fits Bryce Young's style. Playing in the dome, Indianapolis Colts, that would be a great addition. You look at the AFC quarterbacks, Bryce going against Mahomes, CJ Stroud, what I would get into, but Bryce Young. Listen, I think that would be so interesting. But to your point, I think it's important that Bryce goes to a team that sets him up offensively. They got a decent offensive line in the Indianapolis Colts. They got Jonathan Taylor, Michael Pittman at receiver. They have a lot of pieces, and I think Bryce Young can have a lot of success. Somebody says the Falcons would take him. We would get into the Falcons. A lot of rumors with Falcons and Lamar. You never know, but this is what we do here at Football University. So great question. So I want to stay on par with Bryce Young. So I talked about Bryce and the Indianapolis Colts. I'm hearing about the Houston Texans with the number 2 pick. I'm hearing rumblings that they think, listen, they want Bryce, but they don't know if Bryce is going to be there at number 2. So that's the big question, because you're hearing a lot of feed from the Indianapolis Colts, maybe wanting to trade up for Bryce Young. I mean, who wouldn't want to trade up? But the Indianapolis Colts have that number 2 pick and the number 12 pick. I think they could utilize both picks. Maybe I think they go quarterback, but let's say Bryce Young is off the board with the Colts at number 1. You think, to me, number 2 quarterback on the board is CJ Stroud. You think Nick Caserio, they go with CJ Stroud. And if you look, CJ Stroud versus Bryce Young, AFC South division rivals, Houston, Texas, Indianapolis Colts. These two teams are kind of going to be married together with these 2 picks. So it's going to be interesting to see how this plays out in the near future. But, man, so much talking about Bryce, the AFC South with the Colts, and the potential with the Houston Texans. So let's get to the student section before we get to our next topic. Somebody said the Falcons would take him. Spencer said, do you think it would be interest of players to have a couple of years to adapt to the NFL? I mean, it would be beneficial, but the NFL is a right now league. It is a what have you done for me lately league. So you got to be able to produce. We know these fan bases get impatient. These owners get impatient. They're always looking for, somebody to do, to win. And you see coaches getting fired. There's a lot of changeover. So, I mean, I think they have a lot to do as far as adaptation. But you look at a Bryce Young, especially with the influx of NIL, most of these guys coming from these big-time program, Bryce Young, Will Anderson, these guys are mentally focused. I think they are mature enough to handle, large sums of money. They've graduated, excuse me, as long as they know that it is a business and their business is taking care of themselves and them being their CEO of their craft. Listen, you're not going to have, Coach Saban and all those guys to all the support staff guys to wake you up and make sure you're on time for meetings. You're going to have to be the CEO of your own business and be mature enough to know this is my employment. I need to be the best at my craft. You look at a Kobe Bryant, you look at a Michael Jordan, where these guys were just so focused on being the best. And that's the type of mindset I think these guys like a Bryce Young, Will Anderson will take to the NFL. But I do think, you could have a couple years to adapt, but you have to be able to be a little bit more mature going into the NFL. And I think the best players have that maturity level and are easily to adapt in the NFL. Great question. So we've talked about Bryce Young and the Texans, Bryce Young and the Colts. Let's talk about Bryce Young and the Chicago Bears. There was a lot of talk talking about, the Chicago Bears hold the number 1 pick, and I think GM Pearls mentioned saying that, hey, everybody's available, on the team, nobody, kind of has their spot concrete. Maybe he was kind of dangling the carrot, but you see a lot of these teams starting to play chess. You're probably going to start hearing the bad reports about Bryce's height and his weight. And people, listen, that is all propaganda from teams further down trying to knock Bryce down to them. That way they can take him. Trust me, it's all a funny game. But back to the Chicago Bears. You hear Justin Fields. They have Justin Fields, the starting quarterback, sensational talent at the quarterback position. He can do so many things. Bringing it back to Alabama. Alabama played Justin Fields in the national championship where he put up 50-some points, let him know that the SEC is still dominant. But Justin Fields had a great year. I think once they found out how to use him sort of like a Jalen Hurts, more of a run-first type of quarterback, really sets up a lot of things offensively, jet motions, pistols, running quarterbacks to open up the pass. I think that helped Justin Fields, but that brings us back to a lot of Bryce Young versus Justin Fields talk. And I want to get your thoughts. Do you think the Chicago Bears student section and fan, do you think if you're the GM, do you trade Justin Fields or do you keep Bryce? Do you draft Bryce Young or do you keep Justin Fields? And that is the great question. But I think if I'm the Chicago Bears, this is my 2 cents. If I'm the GM, I roll with Justin Fields, and since I got the number 1 pick, I'm actually going to see if I can trade with, a Houston Texans who has 2 first-round picks. See if I can trade down, maybe get a Will Anderson, maybe pick up another receiver, maybe pick up another 2 more second-rounders, because there's a lot of talent in this draft. And I think with Bryce, Justin Fields, or whoever, even if you take Bryce Young, you still need to put weapons around him, invest in the offensive line, investing in shore up that defense, and make sure you have the offensive scheme for him. But it's going to be interesting to see, does the Chicago Bears stick with Bryce Young or do they go with Justin Fields? Me personally, I think I stick with Justin Fields for another year and see what assets I can get. Maybe if I get 3 first rounds for that number 1 spot, hey, I'm happy. I'm going to get weapons for Justin Fields. But it's so interesting. You're starting to hear a lot of comparisons. A lot of Chicago Bears fans, we know they're everywhere. They're kind of split on this. I think 60% kind of want to keep Justin Fields, but you have about 40% that's saying, hey, listen, let's draft Bryce Young. Mike Tannenbaum, former NFL GM, said, hey, listen, Bryce Young's a better passer already than Justin Fields. So it's a lot of arguments, but, I don't see the Chicago Bears bailing on a quarterback, but unless you get 4 first-round picks and a receiver and a lineman, hey, it's the NFL. Things could be had. But I do think they stick with Justin Fields. So let's get to the student section. Y'all are going crazy. So shouts out to Spencer, Jeff Stapleton, RTR, Bob Rutherford, Roland. Only the number 1 lady of the show. Thank you, Spencer. Yes, shouts out to Lori Caddell. Oh, Nick Saban Jr. said, let's hit that like button. Please do. Roll Tide, roll Tide. Let's see. Lori Caddell says, I think you have to take a chance on Bryce. You have someone who adapts, someone who don't. Johnny Manziel versus Jameis Winston. Whoa. I don't think, to your point, you do think I see your point, Lori Caddell, where you could take a chance on Bryce, because Bryce Young is so talented. You're looking at Patrick Mahomes, you're looking at Steph Curry from the quarterback position. Listen, he has that it type factor. But I think if you have to shore up that offensive line, you got to put weapons around him, and his scheme fit has to fit him. Me personally, I think the best fit for Bryce Young is Indianapolis Colts and the Houston Texans. I think with D'Amico, I think he signed a new offensive coordinator, guy that comes from D'Amico worked with the San Francisco 49ers, up and rising star offensive mind. You look at that Kyle Shanahan coaching tree, they're going to run the ball. They're going to use a lot of different formations. You look at John Mechie, Chris Harris at the linebacker. I think they could do a lot offensively. So I think for me, Indianapolis Colts, Houston Texans are the best fit for Bryce Young. I gave all my points for Shane Steichen and the Indianapolis Colts, Jim Irsay, Bryce playing in the Dome. I mean, being in that divisional matchup, I mean, that could be interesting. Going against Bryce Young, Patrick Mahomes, the Colts have a decent enough offensive line. Kelly, Quentin Nelson. I mentioned Jonathan Taylor, Pittman at receiver. All thing they need is a quarterback. And Bryce, I mean, the Colts beauty, that could be interesting. But great point. Oh, my goodness. So let's keep them coming. Let's go to another comment in the student section. We know we got Falcons fans in here. Roll Tide and Rise Up said, Lord, I think the Falcons would waste Bryce Young talent. My Falcons have to fix the front office if they want to have a successful franchise. Roll Tide and Rise Up, I do agree with you, but I'm going to have to say, listen, I don't think it would be a waste. How excited would Atlanta be if they got Bryce Young? The Falcons would just, listen, they're in a division in the NFC South. Listen, the Tampa Bay Buccaneers, Atlanta Falcons, Carolina Panthers, and the New Orleans Saints. If you draft Bryce Young, you automatically have the best quarterback in that division and already kind of the front leader for kind of the leader in that division. You know, Carolina has the number 8 or 7 pick. I think they go Will Levis. I think Will Levis is kind of that third quarterback off the board. I think after Will Levis, you're gonna hear a lot of talk about AR-15. I've been seeing some video about Anthony Richardson, the quarterback out of Florida. He has been throwing the ball with some pop. I mean, he does have probably a higher ceiling, but you know, people are gonna look at Josh Allen and compare, you know, Will Levis to Josh Allen. When I watch Will Levis in the SEC football, you know, I've been so used to looking at Bryce Young. You looking at other quarterbacks, to me, I see a tremendous drop off. But, you know, I do think he has a lot of upside, a high ceiling. You know, I think it's important that he goes to the right system. But I think it's going to be 4 quarterbacks drafted in the first round. AR-15 kind of rounding it out, maybe the mid-teams 15 and up. You look at the Baltimore Ravens. What do they do with the 17th pick? You know, they just got Todd Monken, offensive coordinator for Georgia. So shouts out to the Ravens. You know, did Ozzie Newsome do that, you know, to kind of take a shot at Georgia? But that's what we do here at Football Universities. But, yeah, it's going to be interesting. So I don't think, to your point, Roll Tide and Wise Up, I do not think that would be a waste for the Atlanta Falcons because it's the quarterback league. You need top quarterbacks to be successful. But great question. This is what we do here at the Football University. I'm going to stay with the student section. Y'all are rocking and rolling. Shouts out to Van Edwards, William Bryant. Great questions. They said they wasted Julio for sure. Man, I will say, to your point, Roll Tide and Rise Up, the Falcons do need to work on their front office. I know they work with Mercedes-Benz, AMG kind of front office. I think you need football guys. So, Atlanta Falcons, tune in to Football University. Your next GM is right here, Matt Caddell, the one and only. I can sing you to the Super Bowl, baby. But that's what we do. So I'm putting my plug in for that GM role. But I can solve your front office needs in the Atlanta Falcons. But I can help you out a lot, get you a winning team. I still gotta throw it out there. Jeff Stapleton says, new players have no choice where they go to play Texas against Bryce. Get Texas. If the Texans gets Bryce or the Colts, does it matter? We have to wait 5 years. I don't think it matters, but I think it's a win-win situation for Bryce. Right now, I think it's a 2-man sweepstakes for Bryce Young. I think it's the Indianapolis Colts, and I think it's D'Amico Ryans with the Houston Texans sitting there at number 2. I mean, they are hoping and praying somebody trades up for that number 1 pick and they don't take Bryce Young. Maybe they take Will Anderson. You never know. How happy would D'Amico Ryans and the Houston Texans be at number 2 saying, listen, we're going to take Bryce Young? And then that puts the Colts in a bad predicament. So it's a lot of chess matches going on, a lot of eerie stories coming out because teams don't want to show their hand until that draft day. You never know. So it's so exciting, but great questions, great comments in the student section. This is what we do at Football University. We talk football. So great comments. So I want to get to my next question, my next topic. And we talked about Bryce Young and the Texans and the Bears and the Indianapolis Colts, where, I think the best fits. And it got me thinking this weekend. We look at all the Bama top quarterbacks, and you look at Bryce Young, who I think is probably the most talented quarterback we've ever had at the University of Alabama. I'm just mad that Bill O'Brien and Pete Golden did not bring us another back-to-back national championships, but that's neither here nor there. And it got me thinking, if you're NFL GM, and I'm putting it out there to all the fans out there, all the student sections in the student section, coming out of college, who is a better prospect, Bryce Young or Tua? Bryce Young or Tua? And really, really interesting. And I must say, I think I'm going to give the nod to Bryce Young. I feel like Bryce, was more durable than Tua. And I think he's more of an, because he was more durable, he showed more poise in the pocket, more awareness. He didn't kind of panic in situations, in big games. Nick Saban Jr., Sports Talk. Hey, tune in to Nick Saban Jr. Bob Rutherford says, Bryce, a lot of Bryce Young love in here, but I think I'm going with Bryce Young. I mean, his poise, his mechanics, he's more of a magician. Not to say Tua was not a bad boy. I mean, throwing in the offense he was doing with Loxley, I mean, he was going crazy with Devontae, Smitty, Judy, Ruggs. It was just, Tua was a bad boy too. But I'm thinking, I was like, who is the better prospect? And I wanted to ask you, and a lot of people are saying Bryce Young. Bryce is more complete. Great comment, Van Edwards. Bryce Young is more complete. And I love them both, but I think Bryce has more NFL readiness. I could not agree with you. I think Bryce is just the better prospect. I mean, he's just showed so much poise. I'm dropping dimes. We're going to get into Bryce Young's top plays, and we're going to have that next week's show. So it's going to be interesting. Bob Rutherford said Tua's hip was a problem, and I think Tua was still kind of, I mean, he had all the arm talent in the world, but his durability staying hurt. Little hits, nicks and knacks right there. But interesting. So I just had to bring that up. It's good to see the student section. Everybody's going with Bryce, so y'all answered the question. But, man, Bryce Young and Tua and Van Edwards, I mean, listen, you brought up my next topic, and I've kind of mentioned it earlier about the Bryce Young versus CJ Stroud. I think how they're going to be kind of close to the hip for the next 5 years, and they're going to be compared to each other. The reason I give the nod to Bryce Young, and you're going to hear a lot of reports saying how CJ Stroud, CJ Stroud is elite. I think Bryce Young and CJ Stroud, the top two quarterbacks in this league. But what separates it for me, Bryce Young did not have a top 5 receiver this year. He did not have the best play calling. He kind of had to do things on his own. And he was going against SEC defenses, and he was injured, and he was still able to have great games and take crazy shots. The Tennessee game, I mean, he was not 100%. We knew that, but he was our best choice versus Tennessee, and how physical that game was. The guy took a targeting hit, and the ref did not call him. But I'm not going to get on that tangent with Tennessee. And also, I mentioned Bryce did not have a top 5 receiver. CJ Stroud is elite. Now, he played a great game versus Georgia, but he has Marvin Harrison Jr. He had Jonathan Smith, the other receiver. He's going to be a first-round receiver this year. So, I mean, listen, I give Bryce. I feel like Bryce had to prove more against tougher competition with less, and still made beautiful sweet lemonade. So I'm gonna go with Bryce. But listen, Bryce Young. If Bryce goes to the Colts, then that means C.J. Stroud is going to the Houston Texans, and they're going to be battling twice a year. So that's going to be great competition for those two. So great comment in the student section. Listen, Roll Tide and Rise Up makes a great point. Oh, this is awesome. He says if Bryce Young had the OC that Tua had, we would have had championship 3 years in a row. Drop the mic. I totally agree. Listen, if we could just like if Bryce Young in a Sark-led offense with the weapons we have, oh my gosh, or a Kiffin type of led offense or Mike Locksley, whew, man, Bryce, we easily are just rolling through teams. But you live and you learn. But hey, that's what we do at football university. Nick Saban Jr. says, I think Fields can be special with the right pieces around him. And the Bears franchise, they're not that great. I agree with you. I think you kind of roll with Justin Fields right there and just see what assets you can get in the first round. Jeff Stapleton says, nice, good points. Great. Jeff Stapleton says, I would take Bryce over Fields. Fields got sacked a lot. He was injury prone. Defense was coming. Plus the O-line was not great. So, I mean, to your point, you got to be able, if you want to set your franchise quarterbacks up for success, listen, you got to be able to run the ball. You got to have a great offensive line. You got to have a good defense. You got to have weapons at the receiver position. You look at what the Miami Dolphins did for Tua. They went and got Tyreek Hill. They went and got Jalen Waddle. They went and got Mike McDaniels, an offensive mind. You have to kind of have that. They're going to invest in the offensive line. They went and got Terry Armstead. They had a couple second, third round draft picks in the offensive line. They were much better, but I think you look at the Miami Dolphins, I think they're going to try and go maybe a Dalvin Cook or maybe a Josh Jacobs, to really shore up that running game to put the complete package around Tua for him to be successful. So great points in the student section. So let's go to my next topic. It's so much we're talking tonight. So I said we're going to talk about Bryce Young's top 10 plays next week. So I want to talk about the offseason. And right now, bringing it back to Alabama, this is the offseason, is leading up to football season, spring training. I know Alabama football had this great tweet. It just got me so fired up as a former player. They tweeted out, I think, Friday about their offseason program, fourth quarter program. It looked like they were doing some new things and a lot more energy and enthusiasm and toughness and grit being showed in the highlight video. It just got me so pumped up. And it just brought me back so many memories being a former player at the University of Alabama, being in the offseason. And let me tell you about the offseason in college. It is so tough. Listen, I've got some stories where this fourth quarter program under Coach Saban, his first year, how hard he was on us. I mean, that offseason program was brutal. Everything was such a challenge mentally and physically. Coach Saban was it was like Navy SEAL type training. I mean, for us having the transition from Coach Shula to Coach Saley, it was intense, and he was trying to weed out and make champions of us. But man, that offseason is tough. And I want to tell you, I know y'all think the players just go out and lift weights and da-da-da-da. No, that offseason is a grind. Listen, it's been times with the offseason, you can't wait to get to the football season because you're like, woo, man, the offseason is no joke. I mean, waking up early, having long workouts, grueling conditioning. I mean, it is all it's tough. But it always makes you better. And championships are won in the offseason. So it was great to see Alabama with that enthusiasm, with that motivation. I mean, you saw Caden Proctor. I mean, he's letting it know, like, listen, he's coming for that offensive tackle position. I think he's going to be at that left. You saw some guys out there. You saw a lot of Malachi Moore, Jahad Campbell. I mean, these guys showed a light. You saw Kevin Steele, Coach Steele, the new defensive coordinator, bringing a lot of energy, a lot of rah-rah, a lot of intensity, attitude is what we kind of missed, and it was so glad to see it. And I think Coach Saban, what he learned last year from his coordinators, he knew he needed to kind of spice things up, get more militant, and bring the energy back, being dominant with the mindset of his players and from his coordinators and his coaches. And it seems like he's gotten more guys, more energetic guys back in the program. And that's what's important. Great comment right here. Bob Rutherford says, do you think Scott Cochran was missed as much as it seems like, or was it just our offensive philosophy changing? I do think you looked at Georgia last year, they had looking at their success, I'll say that, and then seeing Coach Cochran on the sideline and how they were dominant. It was like looking at Alabama football team play on Georgia, So I do think part of it does have to happen with Coach Cochran not being there, but I think Coach Saban self-evaluated. I think he really self-evaluated going to the national championship, sitting there at halftime watching Georgia put a beat down on TCU. And at that moment when David Pollack tapped him on the shoulder and said, hey, Georgia's the new kings of college football, and Coach Saban kind of having to have the blank face and kind of say, yeah, I think that is what got the light going for Coach Saban. I think Coach Saban is on beast mode right now, and I think Coach Saban is self-evaluating and said, if I can't get Coach Cochran back, I gave Georgia the recipe. I know the recipe. I'm the original copy. I'm the original. Listen, I know I need to get energetic guys, coordinators, coaches in my program, and Coach Saban, I think he did that and learned from that. And I think from what I saw from just a little sneak peek tweet of Alabama football's fourth quarter program getting kicked off, I mean, it just made me excited. So I think Coach Saban kind of did that. I think Bama's getting back to where we need to. Answer your question, so I do think, offensively, we could have done better. We know with Bill O'Brien calling plays and having the philosophy. But to my point, I think Coach Saban got it right with Tommy Rees, a guy who's going to run the ball, be out-scheme defensive, be able to call matchups, a great play caller within the game, and know how to adjust and play on matchups, and has great preparation. So great comments. So let's get to the student section. Oh, man, y'all are rolling. Man. So before I get to my next topic, so let's go ahead and get to it. So Football University, this is what we do here at Football University. We talk about anything and everything football. And what crazy weekend, as a football fan, we did not have NFL Sunday, but we had football, and I didn't even know the XFL was playing. So shouts out to AJ McCarron putting on a clinic in the fourth quarter. I know I tried watching the game earlier, and it was just really just kind of like lethargic, to speak. I was like, man, the USFL was a better quarterback product. But I will say this in defense of the XFL, it was just wild. I mean, you're going to get extreme football with the XFL, led by Dwayne "The Rock" Johnson. Do you smell what The Rock is cooking? The people's elbow. I mean, The Rock. I mean, you're talking about I think it was a pretty good investment. The XFL was bankrupt $300 million, and he and some business partners bought it for $15 million while it was low. So they had a year to kind of give things up, but the product wasn't all that great. I'm gonna say that initially, but you look at that fourth quarter, AJ McCarron. You look at some of the rules that the XFL and the USFL have, and we know the Birmingham Stallions are big, winning the championship this past year. And it got me thinking, what did the XFL get right? And I saw some interesting things, and this is what we do at Football University. We talk football. So the XFL, to me, the things they got right, and I know it was a little bit sloppy, it was a little bit mundane at the beginning, but I like the kind of innovative things that they do regarding officiating. Well, regarding the game itself, if you know the XFL and the USFL, they don't do onside kicks. So instead of doing onside kicks that really don't have any change in the game, they have a 3-point play, or you can choose to go in the USFL, you can go the 4th and 12 from the 33-yard line. But in the XFL, you can choose, I think, 4th and 15 from like the 35-yard line. And AJ McCarron made a crazy comeback. He got the 3-point play. And that's what I'm thinking is really innovative. Instead of a 2-point play, I think the XFL and USFL got it right. I know there's a lot of rules to kind of understand. So I think that's kind of the more we understand, the better the games will seem to people watching it. But wow, to have a 3-point play, I think that's innovative. And the way they handle their officiating, instead of like the NFL, and I think these are some of the best practices that the NFL and the SEC could kind of use, or college football could kind of use. They kind of had a command center instead of on a replay, instead of us watching the replay 30 million times and listening to commentators comment about it, and then having the referee analyst comment about it, and you see the official, he goes and watches the play and the little thing, and everybody's trying to analyze these plays, and it takes so much. It takes like 15 minutes, and it's like we're reviewing every little pass interference. Instead, what the XFL and USFL does, they have a command center. They are telling the referee, the umpire, what is going on, who needs to retain possession. If that was a fumble, I know they didn't get it right all the time, but listen, nothing's perfect. But I gotta give shouts out to the XFL for trying to create innovative things to kind of make the game a little bit more fun than different than the traditional NFL or college football. And I think these are some of the best practices that the SEC, the NFL, or the NCAA can kind of use, for to help enhance the game. I do like, now overtime, I do like the collegiate overtime. I do not like the NFL overtime. But I do like the 3-point play. I think that's kind of cool. I do like, instead of the onside kicks, doing the 4th and 15. So I want to hear what your thoughts about some of those rule changes. And I think having the officiating rule kind of command center, I think you start to get some type of consistency, which we need in college football, especially in the SEC. Instead of having so much up and down inconsistency when it comes to pass interference, especially for Alabama fans, the PI call is just so tough on Alabama fans that we experienced this past year. What is a PI? What's not a PI? You kind of have some consistency having a command center. I think it kind of breeds more consistent play calls when it comes to officiating and flags. So I think I want to discuss that, how the XFL and USFL, shouts out to AJ McCarron. I believe Ben Davis, former Alabama player, Texas linebacker, had a good game. I think he got injured. But listen, AJ McCarron, I think he was down, 6-15 or something like that. He gets the 3-point play, hits Ricky Prohl for a touchdown. He converts the 4th and 15. I think they win 18-15. So the XFL is just wild. It is extreme. It is crazy, but I like some of the nuances, some of the innovative things. I think we could kind of utilize that to kind of better the game, kind of help with player safety, and kind of get some consistency on these calls. So it did make me want to say I'm excited for the USFL. Now I'm ready to see the Stallions play. And it got me thinking, how cool would it be if the XFL and the USFL, since they're playing in the spring, what if they played each other? How cool would that? You can kind of have like the champion of the top 2 teams in XFL play the top 2 teams in the USFL. That would be kind of interesting, kind of have a playoff for there, but you have to come together on rules. But man, that would be so cool, man. I thought about that. I was like, I'm going to talk about this on Football University. So thanks for hearing me out about the XFL and the USFL. I think they should do like a playoff and those 2 teams play each other. And, I'm big on the way they run the rules. And How cool would that be? But the XFL is just wild. You're just gonna have to understand the rules and support those guys. So I mentioned college football. So I did hear about 6-0 said, what do you think of the new changes coming to college football to shorten the game, Matt? I do think, like I said, I do think the college football can take some of the things from the XFL or the NFL. I think we got to get some type of consistency in certain calls. And instant replay should not take forever. Like, we see stuff in real time, but when you watch it, I mean, targeting, to me, the biggest frustration is targeting. What is a target and what is not a targeting call? And B, I don't think the players should have to sit out a whole second half of the next game. Like, okay, he made a bad play. Charge him 15 yards. Maybe he got to sit out the next possession, but don't take him out like the whole second half, the next 2 quarters. I think that's too hard of a consequence for a targeting call. Like, I don't think you should be thrown out. Like, now if you do it again, then yeah, maybe you have to sit out, the next 2 quarters. But I don't think it should just be for one, incidental, unless it's just purely blatant. I think the targeting call needs to have some consistency, and I think that can help shorten the game. If we can get some consistency on calls and have a better system, I think that would help college football. But great point, 6-0. Let's stay in the student section. Man, there's room for different levels of football. I agree with that. I love watching Alabama Crimson Tide, but I'll tune into Alabama A&M, Alabama State. Football is a great game. I mean, I love football. I'll tune it in. I'll try to find in different types of ways to watch football. But yeah, my biggest issue with college football is the pass interference and targeting. I feel like there needs to be some type of consistency. Too many games are messed up. I think they get everything else kind of right, but targeting, pass interference, and especially in the NFL, what is a catch? I mean, let's be honest. What is a catch? Devontae Smith had 2 catches in the Super Bowl, but yet they weren't catches. Like, he maintained possession while he was in bounds, but you said because he was out of bounds, he didn't maintain possession. I don't know. I'm sorry, NFL, please help us out. We need consistency on what is a catch in the NFL. So let's stay in the student section. Great points here. Just Saban said, however you want to say names. He did. David Pollack did make Coach Saban really mad. I'm telling you. I think at that point it was when Coach Saban was like, the national championship was in LA. Coach Saban from LA to Alabama probably had on a private jet, probably a 3-hour probably 3-hour flight to really feel David Pollack, really getting into it. And so I have heard Coach Saban is on a mission and he's back to being militant Saban. So I'm so excited for that. So let's stay in the student section. USFL is still going. I think it starts in April sometime. So I'm excited about the this is a great point by Spencer. Matt, how do referees get held accountable? I know in the SEC, they send tapes. I think they do the same in NFL where, they have to explain. But I know colleges send in tapes to, questionable calls to the SEC office. I think how we can hold them accountable, like I said, I think kind of have a command center where they tell them what the call is and have some consistency. We're going to say, if you do this, this is going to be a pass interference. This is a catch. This is a PI, and call it consistently week in and week out. I think that way, for bring it back to Alabama, that way we can coach our DBs how to play corner without getting called a PI. Because I felt like at times, because it's Alabama and Alabama's brand and it's so much hyper focus on Alabama's players that refs are really looking for any little thing. If the Alabama DB breathed on him wrong, he was calling a 15-yard penalty. Like, huh? Like, but on the flip side, when Alabama's receivers are going for a pass and they're getting tackled, you don't call it. So, like I said, I think it's a lot of inconsistency when it comes to Alabama because Alabama is that dominant. Nick Saban, the championship traditions. I do think there is a hyper focus. Everybody wants to watch Alabama because Alabama is college football. So I do think that's a way we can hold referees accountable, kind of having like a command center. That way you can get more consistency in the play calls. I mean, in officiating, in what is a catch, what is targeting. So I think that's a way we can hold referees accountable. Let's stay in the student section. Y'all are going crazy. Targeting needs no gray area. Respect from defensive player. I think pass interference really needs to be looked at. Like, I think targeting, pass interference, and for the NFL, like, what is the catch? Like, let's be honest. Like, Devontae Smith had these catches in bounds, and you said they weren't a catch. I don't know. It's crazy. A lot of people saying they like the 3-point play. That is so cool. 3 seconds to touch the ball. Yeah. Jeff Roy says, I want to give props to Bama basketball team, and Nate knows this is a Final Four team. Listen, I got Bama and Kansas in the national championship. Hey, I told Petway, who's the assistant coach in Alabama, I got Bama and Kansas. I told him this at the Texas A&M game. So shouts out to Antoine Petway, Brandon Miller, Pringle, all those guys, Coach Oates. Let's go win a natty. Let's keep getting better and better and better. So shouts out to Bama basketball. So we want to show them some love. But man, y'all are somebody talking about the LFL. Y'all are going too wild in the student section. Let's get to my next topic while y'all are talking about. So we talked about the XFL, USFL, 3-point plays, replay command center, things that I think they got it right. Now I want to bring it back to the USFL and XFL. This is my last point. So in the European Soccer League, I'm shifting things from football to football because this is football university. I'm talking about soccer, it's an international sport. But in the European Premier League, they have a level where if the league teams are not performing well, they bring up the lower level teams to perform in the European Premier League. And I was like, wow, how cool would that be if they incorporated that? The XFL and USFL kind of incorporated that. Like the bottom teams in the USFL maybe play the, get in the XFL or, what if the NFL did that? Like, let's say nobody wants to watch the Browns. I mean, the Browns aren't that great, but what if you have the top team from the USFL and the top team from the XFL go play these NFL teams? I think that would be kind of interesting, You get more players, you get more fans involved. Hey, this is what we do at Football University. We come up with innovative, creative ideas. I think that would be kind of cool to kind of have those European Premier League rules in professional football. I think that would be kind of cool. So that's my last point on the USFL, XFL. But we talked about Tua and Bryce. And if you're going to talk Tua and Bryce, you got to talk Jalen Hurts. Jalen Hurts had that great, he's MVP runner-up. He had that great Super Bowl performance. And we know Jalen's about to get paid. So I did want to talk about, we know Jalen, he was a second-round pick, so he's well-deserving of every bit of, $200+ million, $40 million a year, those type of contracts. But I do want to say, I do think Jalen does need to get paid. I want all players to get paid. Get paid as much as you can, but don't get paid so much where you jeopardize the team. You take away too much cap space. You can't invest in other players' long-term contracts. So if you're going to get paid, Jalen, try to get all your money up front, guaranteed money. That way it doesn't hit the cap space like a Patrick Mahomes contract, kind of what Brady did when he was with New England. He wanted championships. He didn't just want to be the highest paid quarterback. He wanted to be able to make enough money where he was paid enough that way he can it doesn't hit a cap space where the team cannot invest on other players. You look at the Dallas Cowboys, for instance, they paid Dak, they paid Zeke. Like they're kind of tied with these guys, and so without even sniffing an NFC championship or Super Bowl, so they got one playoff victory. So you got to be able to invest your money in your top players, but without spending so much money where you kind of hurt the team. So I think Jalen's very methodical. He's a very cerebral, even keel type of player. And I think with his his agent, Nicole Lynn, one of the first African-American women to be to have to be a black woman sports agent, but have all these top prospects. I think she does a very good job with players. I think she has Quentin Williams, Will Anderson, all these Bama guys, but I think she does a good job, and I think she's going to make the best decision for Jalen. I think Jalen, the way he is, the way has so much poise, he uses a lot of wisdom. He understands things first before making decisions. I think he's going to make what's best for him and the Eagles in the long run. That way he can get a Super Bowl like Patrick Mahomes. So I wanted to bring that up. So shouts out to the Eagles. Fly, Eagles, fly. Jalen, get paid, but, get paid to where it works best for you as well as the Philadelphia Eagles. They can make investments and they still won't be, have their hands tied for picks or having their money tied. So we talked about I want to talk about this. I want to talk about Eric Bieniemy. I know Eric Bieniemy got the he's won 2 Super Bowls. He's been to 5 straight AFC championships. I mean, this offensive coordinator, I'm high on Eric Bieniemy. Me personally, if you've been a fan of Football University, I say Eric Bieniemy will be number 1 on my list hiring as a head coach. But we saw how things transpired. Shane Steichen got the head coaching job with the Indianapolis Colts, and John Gannon. Both coordinators got for the Philadelphia Eagles, the losing team, got head coaching jobs, but yet Eric Bieniemy did not get a head coaching job offer. And Eric Bieniemy, it was some moves he had to make, but he didn't have to make. But now he's the offensive coordinator for the Washington Commanders. And, for me personally, I think it's not a coach out there that has the resume of an Eric Bieniemy, and I think he should have been a head coach. That is my 2 cents. But I don't know for some odd reason why he's not getting a head coaching offer. And I know he took the route to go be the offensive coordinator for the Washington Commanders. But if I'm the owner, I'm sorry. If I'm going to bring him in as the assistant head coach, I'm like, do I want to take Eric Bieniemy or Ron Rivera? I'm like, hey, Ron Rivera, everything's been cool, da-da-da-da. You can coach the defense, but Eric Bieniemy is going to be my head coach. I think he has that type of pedigree. I don't think he should have to, go to the Washington Commanders to get kind of have his best path to be a head coach. I think it's sad. I think it's disappointing. But at the same time, I understand it. I'm able to see both sides, but I think it's a bad look for the NFL that Eric Bieniemy is not a head coach, and Eric Bieniemy has to go to Washington Commanders and be an offensive coordinator and kind of get from under Andy Reid, kind of have the best path for him to be a head coach. But it is what it is. But I just want to say that I thought Eric Bieniemy should have been a head coach, and it's just I don't think it was a great look on the NFL or the owners, but it is what it is, and I think. Eric Bieniemy was more proactive in taking things in his hands to find his best path to being a head coach. So I understand it. I get what it is, but it is what it is. Still got to continue to improve this thing, and we're going to work at it. But listen, this is what we do at Football University. We talk about all different types of topics. So let's get back to the student section. USFL is coming back to Birmingham. Let's start from the bottom. He says, talking about the Cowboys, Jerry admits he takes a few steps back. The Cowboys will win. I think Jerry's a great boss. He's built so much in that program, but I do think Jerry has to kind of take steps back and let let somebody, let the coach either coach or find ways to be successful. But listen, I think the Commanders are going to have an overhaul. That is interesting. So let's wind it down. I want to say shouts out to the student sections. Roll Tide, Rise Up, Jeff Stapleton, Van Edwards, Everybody, listen, we're going to talk more Bama next week. Jeff Saban has saved that question, but I will answer it real quick. Do you think Saban's running 2 quarterbacks until one of them proves their worth? I mean, I do think we're going to need both quarterbacks initially, but it's going to be interesting. You know, Saban doesn't like to show his hand to like the first game, so it's going to be interesting to see who's going to take the bull by the horns and be the quarterback for next year. But it's going to be interesting. We're going to talk more about spring training, Ty Simpson, Jalen Milroe, the offseason, Bryce Young, NFL Combine. We're going to keep it going. But thanks for all of you all tuning in to Football University here with me, Matt Caddell, another episode of Football University. Enjoy football this weekend. Enjoy the offseason. Let's come back next Monday ready to rock and roll. Again, thanks for joining me. This has been a great episode here with Football University.